The town of Berlin. Country charm at the center of Connecticut.
Excuse me, we're going to call the meeting to order. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Bordenaro.
Here.
Mr. Geit.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Here.
Mr. Lamaglio.
Here.
Mr. Paradis.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
All here.
The rules for the public hearing. After presentation, there'll be an audience of citizens. A sign-up sheet will be here, and I will recognize the citizens who will speak first. And we'll give you approximately 3 minutes. And then after everybody speaks, whoever wants to speak to continue their speech, that's okay. After that, the citizens who have not signed up will raise their hands and they'll be recognized. Once they're recognized by the chairman, please set up by the microphone and state your name and address. Please speak only on the budget. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Sam Lamaglio. I'm the chairman of the Board of Finance, and these are my members. We have our vice chair, Jerry Paradis. He's a CPA and retired partner of Bloom & Shapiro and Company. Sal Bordenaro. He's retired president of Command Helicopters. Kevin Geit, who's a project engineer, project manager for construction. Mr. Mark Holmes, who's a CFO officer for Hartford Distributors. And John Richards, he works for Advanced Payroll and Billing. He also served on the Board of Education for 14 years. He also worked on the high school project, and now he's on the Board of Finance, and he was the liaison representative for the Board of Finance to the Board of Education. So as you can see, we have a very experienced board in finances, and also I was the CFO for our family-owned company, and now we handle our real estate investments. I would like to explain the budget process and why it came in with the tax increase. Our first budget meeting, we learned it would be a catch-up budget. That means last year, there was approximately $95,000 funded in capital. Capital monies include trucks, police cars, building maintenance, and public safety priorities and other things. My friends, look at the surrounding towns that have invested in education and capital improvements. Companies are moving into these towns, which will offset the mill increase. We are the center of the state of Connecticut, and we remain stagnant. We are 85% dependent on private homes as a tax base. We cannot continue down this path. With a zero mill increase, our property values are going to go down and they're going to collapse. And someday in the near future, we are going to pay a 4 to 5 mill increase just to fix our current problems. This is what the Board of Finance is trying to avoid. This budget proposed is a reasonable budget. We fund education, we fund capital, we fund public safety issues, and we fund our old pension plan that has been underfunded. The Board of Finance process included numerous meetings with town managers, finance director, and public input. Board of Finance scrutinized the current budget line by line. No one sitting on this Board of Finance wants a tax increase, but unfortunately we inherited these problems. The state cut us back approximately $2 million that we had to absorb. We realized that raising taxes would be a burden on seniors with a fixed income. So we have proposed to the mayor and the council they adopt a freeze program for seniors. and we understand that they will look into it soon. The Board of Finance is an optimistic board. Together, we can solve these problems as a community and make Berlin a desirable town for both families and businesses. Thank you. So now if we have anybody that wants to respond on our budget, just feel free. Mr. Healy, please.
Get it up there first.
Good evening. I'm Jack Healy. I'm the acting town manager, and I get the pleasure of presenting the town side, or if you will, the town side of the budget for tonight. The town put the, first I'd like to thank Sam, and also I'd like to thank the Board of Finance for their patience and due diligence as they went through the process. I'd like to thank the Board of Education for all the hard work and that they did preparing their budget and interacting with us and helping plan the capital plan. I'd like to thank the town staff. A lot of people spent a lot of time going through this budget, trying to, look at ways to become more efficient, but also to try to put together a budget that's proactive and not reactive. So we worked hard. All the departments chipped in and tried to do a lot to put together a well-developed, well-thought-out budget. Okay, where we go here? This year, the budget process is a little different than they're used to in the past. You get the voters get to vote on two parts of the budget. You get to vote on the Board of Education portion, and you get to vote on the general government portion. We're going to go as I go through the slides. I'm going to try to go through and describe which parts of the budgets are the town portion of the budget, and there's also part of the town budget that supports the Board of Education with financing, with support on custodial services, and things like that. So we're going to try to describe each part of that. The budget is a bifurcated budget. We have the Board of Education part. I'm not going to try to describe that. Brian's going to describe that for you later. I'm going to go through the general government part and also the part that's overlapping. The general government part includes public safety, the fire, the police department. It includes operational staff, the people who you see when you come into the town hall, from the town manager's office to the tax collector, to the finance department, to the public works. It includes the library, the senior center, the VNA. It also includes the golf course, the public works, roads, public grounds, the building department, and the fire marshal. And I'm sure I missed many of our departments, but those are the people who service you every day. The overlapping part of the budget, as you can see, includes electricity, liability insurance, building support, ground support, nurses, school resource officers, debt service. The debt service for this school and other schools comes to the town side of the budget. It's reflected in what our finance department's budget, the capital, our crossing guards, and our financial audit expenses. The proposed expenditures by the segment that they serve, you can see on the town side of the budget. This year, the town manager proposed $38 million. Last year was $39 million and $2. This year, we proposed $38,824,000. And the Board of Finance, at this point in the proposed budget, is recommending or showing $36,265,000. The Board of Education's portion of the budget is their operations come to $43,881,000, down from last year when they had or the department budget had $44,873,000. The Board of Finance has approved or put in the proposed budget $43,881,000. You can go through and you can see where it includes town staffing, capital, and long-term liabilities for a total of $53,238,000. The total budget proposed for this year is $89,502,000. Our strategy. As we've started into this process, we try to develop a strategy of how we're going to prioritize and develop the budget. That strategy includes public safety, trying to do maintain financial strength, to continue to support the infrastructure and provide good education. Public safety includes capital investments on essential equipment, investing in safe schools, roads, bridges, and grounds, ensuring police and radios function properly, replacing older vans. We have to continuously replace the vans. We need to make sure that the students have proper transportation, and to replace one major piece of equipment for the highway department on an annual basis. Financial strength, our goals are to start to pay down our debt, pay down our liabilities, to maintain compliance with ongoing payments and reporting requirements, maintain disciplined budgeting and capital allocation, provide adequate staffing and training to maintain the programs and services that we currently provide to the town, reduce dependence on debt for annual initiatives. The goal was this year to start moving some of the capital from bonding and debt to the operating side of the budget, and to fund actuarially determined pension contribution. We're going to go into that a little bit further as we go into the slides, but there's an old pension system here that we still have 14 employees that we have to maintain a pension system for. As those employees go off the pension, that liability will be reduced. Also, to maintain the infrastructure. The town has 110 miles of roads. You should be turning a road over every 20 years, so we try to do 5.5 miles of roads every year. The town has many bridges that need to be maintained. There's an evaluation of those bridges. We currently have 5 bridges in a process to maintain those bridges and upgrade them. We also have technology requirements. The infrastructure for technology needs to be upgraded, and we're looking at putting in new switches, new wiring to maintain the technology that we have. We also have a business continuity plan, which we're funding to make sure that the town, in case of emergency, can operate, and also provides protection for the infrastructure we have. Education, we wanted to make sure that we were able to fund special education in compliance with state statutes. Replace reduced federal grant funding. We'll talk about reduced grants shortly. Invest in critical and desired programs, and fund to maintain desired student-teacher ratios. I'd like to just address the revenue portion of the budget for a few slides. This year was a revaluation year. The state requires that we do revaluation every 5 years, and it was our year. So we've been going out and doing the reval, and because of the revaluation, there is an increase in the amount of value to the town of all the property. The grant list base for the proposed budget is $2.29 billion, an increase of about 3.6% over last year, which generates about $2.6 million in additional revenue. That revenue is offset partially by the amount of money we lost from the state in grants. So what would be anticipated, a growth in the revenue of $2.6 million, much of it is used just to take up the loss of revenue that we got from the state of Connecticut. This is a slide just indicating where the grant list has gone over the last 5 years. If you look at 2014-15, the grant list was about $2.1 billion, and it's grown to this last year of almost $2.3 billion. If you look at how we fund our town in our budget, we have different revenue sources. The majority of the revenue comes from taxes, property taxes. Connecticut, by nature, has most towns fund their budgets by using property taxes. Other than that, we have governmental grants, about 6.5%, fees that we charge when certain things are done within town hall, when you come in for permits, and other services, we charge fees. That's about 4%. Use of fund balance. We try not to use fund balance to help balance the budget. This year, we're proposing about 2.9% of the budget be funded by the use of fund balance. We also get about 0.5% from investment earnings. I think everybody's aware of the state of Connecticut and their budgetary problems. Over the last several years, you would see from 2015 to 2017, you saw a growth in what the state grants were coming to the town of Berlin. As you can see, it peaked in 2017 as far as what was budgeted. The amount of grant that actually came to the town was less than what was budgeted. This year, we budgeted less money, and the projected revenue that we're going to get from the state is even less than that. And I think you're aware of that we had to, about midstream, the Board of Education had to come up, reduce their budget by about $400,000, and the town had to reduce their budget by about $200,000. If you look at our operating expenses by type, the schools, excluding the Board of Education operations themselves, it uses about 10.3% of the budget. General government, described as our operations, our staffing, our offices, that comes about, in our debt servicing, comes about 13.7%. Community development, economic development, 2.6%. Public safety, the police, the fire, ambulance, that's about 28.8% of the budget. Physical services, which are your highways, your bridges, parks, services, the roads, grounds, about 23.9%. Parks, recreation, and libraries comes to about 12%. In health and human services, which is the VNA, and our social services, about 8.6% of the budget. The non-operational expenditures, we wanted to show what it is, the comparison between personnel, what we pay for the people who are employed by the town, and the operating expenses. If you look, there's a comparison here of general government through the schools, and you can see that overall, total operations, 71% of our expenses are people who work provide the services either at the schools or within the town hall. The operating cost of materials and cost of servicing debt and buying materials is about 29% of the budget. Forgive me for the eye chart, and I'm not going to go through each line. We just wanted to give an indication of how the budget process went from the time that the town staff proposed the budget and presented to the Board of Finance. The Board of Education initially had put in a budget of about $44,872,000. They proposed a reduction of about $991,000, so their budget was $43,881,000. Then the Board of Finance has adopted that as part of this proposal. On the general government side, we proposed a budget of about $49,235,000. We met several times with the Board of Finance, and as Sam said, finally we went line by line through the capital budget one night, and they wanted to know what the money was being spent on and the justification for that. The eye chart here is a list of the items that they went through and they reduced from the town side of the budget. Okay. The question always comes up, what's the mill rate change? What's it going to do to my taxes this year? As you can see, what's here is a list of the expenditure changes in the impact on the mill rate. If you're looking at like capital for the town, the amount is $1.3 million increase, so the mill rate increase associated with that is about 0.57. This chart itemizes each one of the changes that we have or is proposed as part of the Board of Finance budget. So that at the end of the first round, it was $4.27 million of increases at a mill rate of 1.86 mils. Revenue changes. There was some revenue change due to the revaluation. Other sources, including fees and investment income, grand list growth, came out to, so at the end of the day, the mill increase is about 1.67. That's what's being proposed as part of this budget. Non-personnel drivers of the cost, capital and long-term liabilities. As Sam said, we're increasing the amount of capital requested this year. Much of it is for police equipment, roads, bridges, highway trucks, things that are necessary to keep the town infrastructure and developed as part of a 10-year plan. The Finance Department, along with the Public Works Department, has developed a 10-year plan laying out the expenditures over the next 10 years. We're trying to plan ahead and look at how we can better utilize our money and see where the expenses are going to be over that time duration. What we've done is we're looking at how to also do that better and not use debt, but try to move some of that money over time into the operating side, so that on an annual basis, that expense is not bonded, and so you're not paying the interest on that, but it comes out of the operating expense. Our major capital investments for this year include police, and we've color-coded these to give you some idea. The red is safety. It goes along with safety. So you see police vehicles, highway vehicles, radio lines, school vans, fire alarm, and electrical load improvements at the high school. The blue is infrastructure. That includes bridges, technology. Also, there's TAR replacement. TAR stands for Town Aid Road. It's another grant we get from the state of Connecticut. At this point, it's part of the state bonding, and has not. We've gotten letters from the state saying they're not sending the TAR grant for this year. Annually, it's about $360,000 that we use on infrastructure projects, including sidewalks, road repairs, tree removals. So in the budget this year, we're proposing, or as part of this proposed budget, is about $120,000 worth of TAR money, as we're calling it. It's not the same amount, but it's what we went through and justified to the Board of Finance. It's necessary so that we can continue those improvements. Also, for schools, you can see that we're looking at phones. All the schools need phones. The phone systems here are outdated. I know McGee, we've gotten a lot of requests from McGee for new phone systems. The McGee auditorium carpeting, it's old, it's antiquated, it needed repair, it's coming up, so we've asked for, that's been also part of this. And also cages for sports equipment at the high school. For the community services, we're looking at kitchen cabinets at the senior center, some equipment at the community center, and at the golf course, we're looking for for grounds, we're looking for some grounds equipment, some mowing equipment, and at the golf course, some golf maintenance equipment. The debt balance, I've referred to it a couple of times, and I think Sam alluded to it. Currently, bonds outstanding is about $83.1 million. We also have capital leases. The town entered into an agreement 2 or 3 years ago with Noresco to upgrade and make energy improvements throughout many of the school buildings, including putting solar panels on several of the school buildings. The town took a capital lease on that of $12.8 million. So our total currently of indebtedness of $95.9 million. The debt plan going forward is to borrow $5.2 million of new money. The town is required to upgrade the Railroad Pond Dam. The expected expense of that is $1.5 million. It's also we have to do, we are contracted out to do the High Road Bridge. That project should start within the next few weeks. Continue to improve roads, resurface the Scalise Field. We're also looking to pay down $6.5 million in debt. Currently, each year we look at what we can do as far as bonding. We're trying to reduce the total amount of bonding and see what we can do as far as getting these projects completed. Also, leases. We're looking at new trucks for the highway department. Initially, we proposed one truck at a cost of about $200,000. Working with Jim Simons in the garage, he's researched that we can actually lease 3 trucks for the same amount of money. We have 3 highway trucks currently, which have rusted frames. It's at the point where they need to be replaced. Jim's gone out, he's obtained information where we can lease 3 new trucks for about $200,000, the same expense that we would for 1 new truck if we bought it. Those, of course, we have to pay for those trucks over the next 3 years, but that would put the highway department in a much better position. And also, we want to continue to pay down $580,000 annually of the energy program lease. This is the 10-year debt history, service history. You can see starting in 2009, you had a little over $2 million of indebtedness. Since then, and this year we are proposing up to almost, if you look at the amounts, up to about $8 million. and over the same amount of time as what our projected debt service will be. As you see, it's continuing to rise, and it peaks about 2020. After that, it starts going down, and that's when we want to start moving some of the debt from bonding and start moving some of the capital projects into the operating costs, so we continue to drive the debt down. Previously, I talked about a closed pension plan. There are 14 employees on a pension plan, an old pension plan. All the newer employees are on have a different type of a plan, but the pension for those 14 employees, we still are responsible for. We're expecting 3 to 5 retirements this year, which will continue to drive down our total cost of that plan. It looks on this chart like we're going up, but once all of those employees retire, our requirement for funding this will go away. So we're looking forward to, over the next 5 to 10 years, that this expense to the town budget will be eliminated. The unassigned fund balance is a percentage of the budget. Each year we talk about the unassigned fund balance. Typically, we have set a policy of trying to keep 11% of the total budget as unassigned fund balance. Over the last few years, it's varied between 12.56% to 14.57%, depending on how much is used to balance the cost and to keep taxes at a lower level. Last year, we had dropped it down to about $11,079,000. Part of that was used to retire some of that pension cost that we had from the old system, from the old pension system. Now, the two questions that we hear most: how much will my taxes increase, and what do my tax dollars support? Based on the proposed budget of a 1.67 mil increase on a $250,000 home, assessed at $175,000, with a proposed mill rate of 33.28 mils, the tax bill would be about $5,824. That's an increase of $292 from last year. Kevin's also broke this down, showing on a monthly basis it's about $24, and on a weekly basis about $6. So that's the proposed increase using the proposed mill rate. Where do those dollars go? If you look at that, your $5,824, where do they go? About $3,000 goes to the Board of Education for school support. $654 goes to long-term liabilities, paying for our bonding costs and our long-term debt. $609 goes to public safety. $506 goes to physical services, roads, bridges. $265 goes to the town operations, the general government. When you come in, those are the people you meet. About another $257 goes to park and rec in the libraries. $183 goes to the VNA and social services programs. $134 goes to capital. $91 goes to transfers, and $56 goes to community services. In summary, what the goals of this budget were to maintain existing services, make several critical capital investments. That includes roads, the dam, bridges, investments within the school, phones, cars, and trucks, making necessary contributions to the closed pension fund, replace some of the state grants, and maintain tight expenditure controls. Declining grants and critical investments has increased the mill rate in this proposed budget to 33.28 mils. Each year we have to present, as part of the budget, the Water Control Commission. That's the water and the sewer system for the Berlin portion of the town. There's 3 different water companies in the town. The Berlin portion has to be included in the budget on an annual basis. Their costs are increasing. Their infrastructure requirements are also going up. So over time, there will also be some changes in their system. We're looking at total expenses within their commission of $6.4 million. Okay. The next steps. The Board of Finance tomorrow night will vote to recommend the Board of Education and a general government budget to the Town Council. That's anticipated for tomorrow night. The Town Council has 5 days to review that and to review and to either adopt that budget, or they can, as is, they can adopt the Board of Finance proposed budget with reductions, or they can reject the Board of Finance budget, and then they have, the Town Council and the Board of Finance have to get together and arrive at a agreeable budget with a supermajority. The budget referendum is now scheduled for April 24th. So, with that, thank you. I believe Matt Tenza is here to present the Board of Education budget.
Good evening. I'm Matt Tenza. I am the Board of Education President. I'd like to start by thanking the Board of Finance working with us, Jack, you and your staff, Brian Benigni, who's behind me, and his staff to put this budget together. As you can imagine, it's been a long process. We fully recognize that the state of Connecticut is an interesting financial situation. So with that, we asked Brian to put his budget together and really dig deep and look at every line item so that we could put together a responsible budget, and I believe that Brian has done as expected. I'm going to start this presentation with a little bit of history and some background, and then we'll get into the numbers. That way you can let your mind rest from the numbers we just went through. There's a lot of them tonight. So this first slide here, this is an indication of where Berlin, Connecticut, the school system in Berlin, Connecticut funds its education budget versus the state average. Now, we point this out not to be at the state average, although we certainly would love to be, but we are not. But more importantly is to point out that it's growing apart over the last few years. 4 years ago, we were only about $250 per student below the state average, and now we're up over $1,100. So the trend is not what we would want to see, but it's a fact. Here we go. So this slide is an indication of the superintendent's request, which is the bar, and then the line graph that follows along is where the budget was approved and funded. I'd like to point out a couple of notes. 16 and 17, while we were funded at 1.22%, we ended up at 1.09 because we had to give back the town about $56,000 worth of funding that was reduced through some state grants. Last year, you see, we had a budget of 1.54, but as already mentioned by Mr. Healy, we had to give back $400,000 in this year. So the actual funding is really at 1.58, and this year's request is at 1.99%. What I point out here is it's the lowest request the Board of Education has made since before 2011. So if you fall back to my comment about Brian and his staff putting together a responsible budget, I think that that's a pretty good indication of that right there. This slide is a comparison of surrounding towns and what their 5-year average funding has been. Again, we talked to most of our neighboring towns here, and as you can see, Berlin is last in the funding at 1.94 average overall. This is just a point of comparison. Often we have people talk to us at the board about what about other towns. I think that this is a pretty good idea of what's happening around us. Jack Healy has already talked about grants being reduced, and it happens at the education level as well. Over the last 4 years, state funding has dropped more than 34%, and that is a big part of our budget. It is not in our operating budget, but they are funds we use to educate our children. So as they drop, we have to find ways to make up for those funds. Not surprising, but federal funding is also dropping. Over the same 4 years, it's dropped nearly 13%. And again, those are important items, the way we fund our budget. So this is where we started this year. If you look at this slide, we have, starting all the way at the top, which is in yellow, this was last year's budget with all new requests brought to Superintendent Benigni. So this number would have been $46,743,432. The new requests that made up that $837,000 were a grade 1 teacher, grade 3 do I have this right? 1 grade 3 teacher, 1.5 math support interventionists, 2.5 writing interventionists, 1.5 social workers, 1 paraprofessional, 1 math coach, 1 literacy coach, 1 job coach for Encore, 1 guidance counselor, half of a special education reading specialist, and 1 BCBA. These were all requests that were made of the superintendent, which he did not bring forward into the budget process. In the pink, or the pink section, next one down, is what items that the superintendent reduced through the budget process this year. Superintendent Benigni reduced the budget by over $1 million before even bringing it forth to the Board of Education. Those made up an elementary assistant principal, 2 certified staff members, elementary school team leaders, elementary paraprofessionals, McGee department heads, clerical staff, other non-certified staff, supplies, contracted services, dues and fees, and employee benefits. As you can see, he's touched every department in one way or another. His original budget that he brought forward to us, Brian, make sure I get this right, was the $44,872,536, correct? Yes, 4.3. Okay. Now, the work didn't stop there. He continued to work on this as we continue to work with the Board of Finance. And in looking in our employee benefits, we found some methodologies, and also we have changed our insurance from one program to another, and in doing so, we were able to find another nearly $1 million just prior to the Board of Finance approving and moving our budget forward to this evening. When we found that number, we knew that we needed to do the right thing and bring that forward to the Board of Finance so that they could do the right thing in doing what needed to be for our town and our taxpayers. So what we didn't do is we didn't add things back into the budget to make up the difference, is we brought it forward as a true budget reduction, if you will. So that takes our budget to $43,880,980, which is a 1.99%, as I already talked about, just under 2%. This little orange box here are the only 4 categories that show an increase in any of our budget lines. They are certified salaries, which are contractual. They're transportation, which a portion is contractual, and other are transportation needs for special education and also students we have going outside the district. Contracted services and utilities. Here are the proposed budgets for those same surrounding towns we talked about earlier. I gave you the 5-year averages. As you can see, Berlin's proposed budget for this year is second from the lowest. We're only above Cromwell. Again, I think it reflects Brian, his team's work in the Board of Education for us trying to bring forth a responsible budget. So this slide, it actually shows backwards. So if you bear with me as I try to explain this. The green bar is where Berlin is rated relative to wealth and ability to pay for education and services, okay? So for the year 2016, 2017, we are ranked 65th out of 169. The orange bar is where we fund our education services. In this particular case, it would be, we are 99th out of 169. So what there is a delta. So when people talk to us about Berlin can't afford and we don't have the ability to pay, state statistics would show otherwise. This slide is more of how we broke down the reductions. Again, I want to point out what they are. The elementary assistant principal, the certified staff, the elementary team leaders, the elementary paraprofessionals, the McGee department heads, the clerical staff, the other non-certified staff, supplies, contracted services, dues and fees, employee benefits. Overall, Mr. Benigni has brought forth $2,025,011 of reductions from the overall initial request. One might ask how these reductions will impact the schools. So what we've done is put slides together so that you can see where they will hit. So in the elementary reductions, we see the assistant principal, paraprofessionals, team leader positions, a grade 3 teacher, and technology and supplies. Excuse me. This slide shows the certified staff in relation to population at the schools. So you can see that we work very hard to keep our staffing levels equal with the population levels. So if our population decreases, we try to keep our class sizes at an optimum level for learning. At the same time, we have to keep in mind that we do have declining enrollment. The McGee reductions would be the elimination of department head, a clerical position, technologies and supplies. We have reduced 8.6 teachers from the McGee school in the last 5 years. Again, a graph that indicates that as enrollment declines, so too is our staffing. Berlin High School reductions. We have two teachers being reduced at the high school, a .8 clerical position, a security guard, technology, and supplies. If I might talk to the security guard, Brian, make sure I have this right, is while we do have the security guard being reduced here, we do have another qualified person who is actually going to fill that role. So rather than have 3 people kind of in a rotation, we're going to have 2, correct? There's been a reduction of 3.9 teachers over the last 5 years, and that is with the addition of multiple AP classes being added and strengthening of the curriculum at the high school. When you look at this chart, you see we bring our staffing down, but the crown in the middle of 2014, 15, and 16 is the addition of the AP classes as we strengthen, and that was part of our strategy to make the high school much more competitive. At central office, we've had some reductions here. So I'm sure much to Mr. Benigni's dismay, the first one on here is there was a reduction in salary from superintendent to superintendent. The new assistant superintendent salary will also be a reduction from the previous assistant superintendent salary. And we're also eliminating 1 clerical position, dues and fees, technology, and supplies. This slide shows an indication of what particular categories are in relation to the overall budget. So when you talk about administrative salaries, which is a reduction in this year's budget, administrative salaries make up 5.94% of the overall budget. So It's actually a small piece to the pie. When you look at certified salaries make up 44.16% of the budget. The increase in certified salaries is a contractual obligations, step increments, and percent increases, a total of 3.06. That's the way their contract rolls out this year. And we also have teacher leader positions for Griswold and Willard in lieu of the shared assistant principal. So what that means is those teachers will actually have a stipend that will help offset some of the administrative work that needs to be done there. Employee benefits overall makes up 14.89% of the budget, just about 15%. All of our bargaining unit groups are now on the high deductible health plan with HSAs. Also included in this line item are the health insurance coverage, unemployment, pension annuities, group term life, disability, Social Security, and Medicare. Transportation. Transportation makes up 6.53% of our overall budget. It is also one of the line items that we show increases on. Increases this year, we have our busing contractual obligation of a 3% year-over-year growth. Berlin has 34 vans in our transportation department. They range anywhere from a model year 2000 to 2007. We also have 2 cars. Mileages range from 4,052 miles to upwards of 161,000 miles. We also have to transport, by state and federal mandate, any students that need special education transportation or to any of the vocational or technical schools. Those are required by mandate. In addition, we provide transportation to any students that go to St. Paul's and Moreland Hill. That's also by state mandate. As our vans age, so too does the maintenance that goes along with that. They're all certified by mechanics, so they are safe, but just like your own vehicle, the older it gets, the more it costs to keep it operating. Our non-certified salaries, they make up just shy of 15% of our budget. There has been an elimination or reduction of paraprofessionals, clerical and security guards here that we've already outlined. Special education. Special education has a pretty good sized piece of our budget. It's 22.4%, 22.4% of our overall budget, and it's essentially 100% mandated. Everything that we do for our special education students is something that we need to do and we should be doing, and we do a darn good job with it. So while it is a good large chunk of our budget, we do a really good job serving our students. Special education drivers. Certified salaries are 36.2%. Non-certified salaries are 19.79%. Employee benefits are 7.2%. Contracted services of 5.7%. Transportation, 10.92%. Tuition, 15.2%. Tuition, what does that mean? Those are for our students that we cannot provide services for, but we need to pay them for outplacements. Tuition for us in our district right now is a little over $1.5 million. And then textbooks and supplies, equipment, administrative salaries, and others are all much smaller slices to the pie. So when you look at the overall summary of our budget, as I said, it's a 1.99% increase request. We thank the Board of Finance for approving that at this point. Administrative salaries is a reduction. Actually, it's quicker for me with all the numbers to tell you what's an increase, right? So certified salaries is an increase of 3.25%. Contracted services is an increase of 17.35%. Utilities is 8.64%. And transportation is 15.11%. That's my presentation on the numbers. I think that we've covered just about everything, so at this point, I turn it back to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone who wishes to address the board, feel free to do so. Just give us your name and address.
My name is Dave Sear, 245 Cole Lane, Berlin. I have a couple questions first, because I want to make sure I understand what's going on here, and then I'll possibly have some comments. Now, Chairman Lamaglio, in your opening statement, you had indicated something about plummeting property values. And you had also indicated something about economic development, and we're not doing a great job with economic development. So I want to make sure I understand plummeting property values and what your comments meant about economic development. Because I think that's the way I heard it.
No, I think you misunderstood.
Okay.
What I stated was that other surrounding towns, if you invest in capital improvements and you invest in education, companies like to see towns that invest in themselves. If you fail to invest in those things, the result will be that properties will devalue and people will move out of town, and companies don't like to invest in towns that don't invest in themselves. And it's basically my opinion.
Okay. All right. The other question I have is a per capita bonding for Berlin residents. And I had heard that we are one of the highest per capita bonded municipalities in the state. Matter of fact, I heard we were number 2. Is that in fact correct?
I think you're probably referring to the chart in the town manager's budget, and that was in reference to Hartford County. But on a per capita basis, Berlin is about twice the state average for debt.
Okay. The new proposed mill rate of 33.28, does that include the fire district tax as well? And if it doesn't, how much does the fire district tax equate to?
It doesn't, it doesn't include that, and I'm not sure what Kensington and Worthington's fire district taxes are.
Okay, I looked on the computer today, and the computer said it was a state of Connecticut agency said the fire district is about a little over $1 million.
But those are separate entities. They really don't have anything to do with the town.
No, I understand, but if you have a fire district tax, because some towns don't have fire district tax. If you have
But they don't have anything to do with the town, though. If you have a complaint, you should go to Kensington Fire District.
No, what I'm saying is the total mill rate that the town residents are paying is 33.28 plus a fire district tax.
Right, but
Yep,
it
that's
has
all I
nothing
want
to do with
I just
us.
want to make sure I understand what the total mill rate is that we're going to be paying. The
Dave.
other question I had,
But it's not apples and oranges. I mean, you're comparing something wrong. You're deceiving the public. Because the Kensington Fire District tax has nothing to do with the town. Not everybody belongs to the Kensington Fire District. So,
is the fire district tax,
but we have nothing to do with that, so your
Okay.
point is irrelevant. It's irrelevant, I'm sorry.
it's based on mill rate?
You have to go to Kensington Fire District for that.
Okay, all right. The other question I had is reserves. I understand we've taken money out of our reserves, out of our savings account. I'll call it a savings account. Is that money reflected in the 1.67 mill increase, or that's on top of the 1.67 mill increase?
It's included in the calculation that would get to 1.67.
Okay, okay, good. The other comment I have is in regards to economic development. I'm on the commission. We are constantly competing with other communities in central Connecticut and elsewhere to bring businesses to our town. And it's not easy, and I think that Chris Edge and Jim Mahoney are doing a great job doing that. But every time we increase our mill rate, it does affect our ability to attract businesses to our community. We don't have an enterprise zone. We're surrounded by communities that have enterprise zones, and businesses get huge tax breaks when they relocate there. So it's a disadvantage for us as we compete to bring businesses to town. So I would ask you to be cautious as when you raise the mill rate, you also affect our ability to bring businesses to town. And we need to continue to bring businesses to town, as Chairman Maglio alluded to, because we need grand lists, and that's what it does. So I would ask you to please consider that as you set the mill rate. The other concern I have is, and Jack Healy alluded to it, we're sort of like in a crisis at the state level. It's sort of a disaster. We took a $2 million hit. Jack alluded to that. Earlier in the week, they bailed out Hartford to the tune of over it's $500 million. That's big steam that really came from most of the other municipalities in the cuts, and then they just gave it to Hartford to bail them out. Our transportation fund is broke. I don't see any relief in sight. I don't think it's going to get better next year. It'll probably get worse. So we're going to have additional cuts from the state of Connecticut next year. And I just want to make sure that we recognize that as we go forward and we spend the taxpayers' money on different things. I do believe that a mill rate increase that's approaching 2 mills. We're at 167. I think it's too high. I'm sorry, I believe it's too high. I would, given all the problems at the state level, and I see no relief in sight, I'd encourage you to sharpen your pencils and try to come up with a lower mill rate than you proposed for the town of Berlin. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Richard Paskowitz, 13 Elwood Road. In response, I'd like to give some more data to reply to the speaker that preceded me, my friend, Dave. Per pupil spending, we saw some charts about how Berlin compares to the various communities in the state of Connecticut. In this disparity between what we spend per youngster compared to the other towns is nothing new. It's been here for 30 years. 30 years. We've been way below the state average. One of the things the state of Connecticut does when it calculates that per pupil spending, by the way, we don't do it, the state of Connecticut does, when it calculates per pupil spending, it does not include debt service. And why does it not include debt service? Because we know, and Berlin's a classic example, every town's debt service is basically cyclical in nature. We had years and years and years of very low debt service compared to the towns around us. No one said a word. Yet the per pupil spending was still out of whack compared to the state average. Now our debt service is high, but it doesn't affect per pupil spending. And why is it high? We had 4 first-class schools. The flagship school of the district, this one, was anything but a flagship. It now is. So our debt service went up. But please remember, debt service is cyclical. We had many good years when it was low. It's high. It will come back down. But what bothers me is the historical gap between per pupil spending and the state average. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paskowitz. Anybody else?
Good evening, Fred Jortner, 76 Schultz Road. First, I just had a couple of questions, then I'll have a couple comments. On the revenue side, interest on investments. 2017 actual revenue was $241,000, and I see you're budgeting $200,000. Now, in light of the fact that the Federal Reserve has indicated they're going to, increase the prime rate 3 times this year, I guess the question is, why are we budgeting less than the actual was in 2017?
At that time, we were able to invest in longer-term securities. There was more stability from Hartford. Given the lower money coming from Connecticut, from the state, and the uncertainty of that, we're forced to invest the money in shorter duration. We need to be more liquid, basically. Shorter duration investments have a lower yield, which results in less investment income.
Okay, thank you. And the other item is the other receipts. What consists of that item? $391 million, $391,000 actual revenue in 2017, and we're down to $35,000 as a budgeted item.
As was mentioned earlier, the capital in the budget for FY18 was about $98,000. There were pressing capital needs, and so the town, with the agreement of the council, utilized an energy rebate grant for $350,000 to fund one-time capital items. That happened in FY17 and then was carried over into FY18 to fund items, for example, a highway truck that broke down just before the winter storm. It afforded us an opportunity to replace that truck. So the $391,000 is actually an anomaly because of that $350,000 grant being utilized to ensure we had at least minimum funding.
Gotcha, thank you. I will just say that it appears to me that this is a responsible budget. Nobody wants to pay more taxes, but everybody wants their roads maintained and their garbage picked up and their roads plowed and a quality school system for their children and grandchildren and fire and police protection to be available when they need it. And in light of the state situation and less money coming in and the, less than stellar grand list growth, I think you guys have done a fairly good job. And, we need to consider the fact that these folks here at the front of the room, they pay the same taxes as everybody else. And I'm sure they're doing the best they can for this community. So I want to applaud you and thank you for the effort you put in on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move to adjourn. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.